Welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I'm Alex Hopkins, your honor producer, and I'm so excited. We're starting a brand new series here. It's called The Great Senate Race, and I have in studio with me my two favorite sportscasters of politics, Ed Seelover of Denver Business Journal and Jeff Wasden of Colorado Business Roundtable. So we know we have some great seats opening up in this U.S. Senate. So tell me a little bit about the series.
Well, I think what we want to do is we want to follow up on the series we did last year with the gubernatorial candidates. That was a very stacked race. We got to talk to a lot of them through the primaries. And this year we're looking at a Senate race that is the Republican seat that is most targeted in the country by Democrats for takeover, that being held by Cory Gardner, who's been in office since 2015. And as of early September, we have 11 candidates who are in this race. I think you're going to hear a lot of back and forth, a lot of sniping, a lot of political ads. And what we want to do is we want to talk to those candidates about the issues they're going to be dealing with, and specifically the business issues if they go to Washington. How are the environmental efforts going to affect business? How are they going to be able to deal with healthcare in a way that's going to affect business? How are they going to address business as business, not just as as something that is painted as an evil get in the way of climate change efforts? What are these candidates really looking to do? And so we're hoping to bring them on one by one, a month at a time, and see if we can talk to them about what they want to do on these issues and get conversations around the issues going rather than just around the politics.
And I think you framed that incredibly well, and I think this is a great opportunity for us to continue along that line of finding Colorado's next governor and our primary series that we did last year. This is the targeted race in the country, and I think it puts Colorado in an incredible position. Our ability to come together with the Business Journal and the Colorado Business Roundtable and have this kind of series is amazing. It's fun. It's fun to have you back in air. You do an incredible job representing the business voice as part of your role there with the Denver Business Journal, and really framing the questions really from that angle, right? I think a lot of other people that approach this from the political side ask a very different set of questions, right? You're asking the kind of things: what is the impact of climate change on business? What does minimum wage do? Family medical leave? How do we address health care and its impact on business? How are we going to fix our roads and bridges in this country? These are real issues that impact business every day. How do we supply the labor? What are we doing with education funding, workforce, training our employees for jobs of the future? And so, this is exciting, not only at time to be discussing these particular critical issues, but certainly in a race that's going to be right in front and center nationally. We've got some incredible candidates. The race has shifted a little bit since we talked about starting the series.
Yes.
Mike Johnston has dropped, and Hickenlooper has certainly decided that the presidential aspirations are put on hold, and he's pivoted toward now the U.S. Senate race, which has certainly changed, I think, a little bit of the landscape. Interesting to see Mike Johnston's. Curious your view. We're not going to have him in here to talk to him about that during this particular series, but I think a guy that many people knew from his previous runs for governor, etc. But a lot of changes in this race, Ed.
Yeah, and I think one of the things the series can do too is that there's so much energy that was sucked out of the room by Hickenlooper announcing that he was getting into the race, and we certainly want to talk to Governor Hickenlooper about this. He's a guy who can certainly talk business policy, but we want to talk to the other candidates too. I don't think there should be a race about 10 people running against John Hickenlooper for this nomination. There should be a race of people putting forward different ideas. I think the business community is going to hear some things they like from these candidates. I think the business community is going to hear some things they don't like from these candidates. Not that the business community itself is monolithic in its views, but the important thing is that we want these candidates to be able to explain their positions and to come away from this where people know who they are and are not voting on the basis of someone's name anymore, but are voting on the basis of where they stand and what they can do.
Well, and certainly some of these candidates with track records, right, and talking about their background, why they're running, why they got into this race, their goals, what they hope to accomplish, how they align ideologically when they move back in there with so many polarizing figures back in the U.S. Senate today, and where they're going to fit in. And then again, how they address these issues, trade, tariffs, national security, which may not be a huge business issue, but many of these folks that come out of state or local politics that have to jump in and start dealing with Iran and North Korea and and China, it's a whole different ball game, right? And when you start talking about China, and sure, national security, but how are we dealing with them on trade and intellectual property and currency manipulation and things that matter again to the business community? It's going to be great to have these kind of conversations and engage really in some very interesting topics with some very, I think we'll see some very different views. I think these candidates are diverse. I think there's certainly some very different views and how they're going to position themselves. Do they go after Governor Hickenlooper, right, and his decision? Do they start to go after Cory Gardner? Do they try and attach themselves and attack the president and his policies, or are they going to promote themselves and how they align? And we'll see that from the different candidates.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the nice things about this series, and along with the other series that we've done, we have nice long-form questions to get all of these topics covered. So we're going to get some great feedback from these candidates. I'm very excited for that. And luckily enough, we have our first candidate here with us, State Senator Angela Williams. We'll spend the next 40 minutes with her. I'm going to let Jeff and Ed take right over.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Alex. This is a great opportunity, Ed. It's great to have you back as we jump into another election season, which they seem to keep coming year after year.
It is never ending.
I thought we'd finish it and move on, but it seems like another one comes up, and here we get a chance to talk about the U.S. Senate race, which by most prognosticators, the number one race in the country. Like, this is front and center here in Colorado, which creates a great opportunity, and we've got Senator Angela Williams here to talk about that. But Ed, thank you for your partnership. Look forward to having this as we roll through and start talking about the candidates looking to unseat our current U.S. Senator Cory Gardner. So, Angela, first and foremost, why? What are you doing? What's the reason? What are your thoughts about running and taking this big leap from serving in our state legislature? We've done for so many years in both the House and Senate, representing the business community as chair in those Senate business, which has been great, of course, to have that business voice in your background. But why the big leap? Why are you looking to go back to Congress and D.C., especially when everybody says how broken D.C. is?
Well, Jeff, thank you, and Ed, thank you. Good to see both of you again. It's been an honor to serve almost a decade in the Colorado State House. I know that we've all worked very closely together, and it's just for some of the reasons you just said when you talk about taking the leap. If you look at what's going on in our country right now, I think we have to restore faith in democracy. And if you look at my record for the last 9 years, almost 10 now, being able to bring together people from different coalitions, from opposite sides of the aisle, a lot of adversity, to be able to do that and solve complex issues. And our country right now is in shambles. And there are some issues that I have worked on at the State House that I feel like with my experience being able to legislate, we always talk about it's like making sausage. Well, I've made a lot of sausage, right? And feel like I've had a very successful career at the State House and want to restore some faith in democracy. I would like to help with the complex issues. That's my track record, working on complex issues. And there's a few I'm kind of biting at the bit about, and I look at also what's just the state of our country right now and the divisiveness. It looks like, the aisle is getting wider, and there's divisiveness. People aren't working together on behalf of the people of this country. And I feel like that the people of Colorado, some of their values aren't being represented right now. I grew up in a small town in Oklahoma on a farm, and my parents taught me the value of hard work. They taught me the value of helping others and being honest. And I believe that's what people of Colorado are looking for, is someone that's going to be that voice for them, a trusted voice, a new face, something different from the status quo. And I'm very committed to the people of Colorado. I have been traveling the state. Of course, everybody in Denver Metro knows me, but I've got to get out and I want to hear what the issues are for people in rural Colorado. I can relate to them by growing up in rural Oklahoma, but, it's some of the same issues that we work on at the State House. I was in Alamosa. a couple of weeks ago and spent a day with cattle ranchers and farmers and really just listening to everyday people. And even broadband is just still out there. Ed knows how long we've worked on telecom and getting broadband to rural Colorado, but they do not have the economic development if we can't get that last mile in.
That's interesting. And Ed, I know you're chomping to jump in there, but I'm going to open up the box here. You mentioned a fresh face, a new voice, and not the status quo. This race has obviously changed dramatically. Not only has Senator Mike Johnson stepped out of the race, but Governor Hickenlooper has stepped into the race. So as you talk about what you bring, this fresh voice and face there, obviously there's a little veiled shot at some of the folks that have been in politics a lot longer and have known the political system and have been involved in that. What are your differences? What are your views on that race and how you shaped there, and having the governor step in after saying he did not want to be running for Senate for so long and he would be a terrible senator, and now all of a sudden he's your competition?
Well, first of all, as a candidate with the experience in legislating, I am the only current sitting elected official in the race. So I've worked on the most recent issues like climate change and housing and rebuilding trust between community and police. I've done a lot of the real issues that the people of Colorado in this country are faced with. We have to continue to uplift those who need our help the most. Everyone is entitled to their aspirations, and with some people entering and exiting the race, I'm focused on my race, and my race is for the people of Colorado and showing them that they would have a trusted elected official in Washington that is going to fight for them. It's a wide field. There's no doubt about that too, but Angela Williams for United States Senate is focused on running her race. And I believe I can differentiate myself, and I will, from other candidates based upon what I've achieved in the Colorado State Legislature.
Ed, I think she gave you plenty of things to take from there.
I do, and there's a lot of ways we want to go talk about both what you've worked on for the past 9 years in the legislature and what you want to accomplish in the Senate. I think I want to set the background for people who don't know yours, though. Talk a little bit about your history in business and how that influenced your decision to get into politics, how it influenced the way you look at the way you at bills that come before you.
Well, I've been a resident of Colorado for nearly 30 years now, and I've worked in the nonprofit sector. I've worked in the private sector. I've owned my own business, as both of you know. And so it is those experiences that I have been able to bring to the legislature and that I will take to Washington, because that's what one of the things my team and I are working on is like, where's the business voice in Washington? Where is that voice fighting for small businesses? And as a small business owner for 12 years prior to going into the legislature, those experiences is what catapulted me to get into the Colorado legislature, that not having that small business voice. And I have just been honored to be in the legislature and serve as the chair of business when we had the majority, Democrats had the majority in the House. And I'm honored to serve as chair of the business committee as a role in the Senate, right? So, small businesses are just my passion, and how do we continue to understand the needs of small businesses? And, Ed, I go back to the legislature again, and I want to take this to Washington, is that we have to uplift, minority, women, disabled, and LGBT communities. In 4 years, I was never able to pass a disparity study to ensure that small businesses of this nature were getting their fair share of contracts. I'm having phone calls right now talking to legislators in Washington, D.C., and when I travel about, I don't hear anybody talking about what the SBA was doing. What is the Small Business Administration on a federal level doing? What are the support programs? How are we uplifting? I want to take that same passion to Washington. and uplift businesses. I mean, our friends and our neighbors are small businesses. And I've always said that small businesses are not Democrat, they're not Republican, they're about serving the people. They employ people, you know, the products and services that they offer. And I believe small businesses are the heartbeat of this country, and I'll always be passionate about that. And I plan to take that to Washington.
And just for those who don't know, I'll say your small business was an insurance agency, because I know people tend to overlook the details when they're describing their broad backgrounds there. 12 years owning that. Before we get into specific ideas you put forward, what is Washington not doing for small business? You say you want to be the small business voice there. What are they doing that is either hurting small business, or what is not being done that you as a U.S. Senator would do?
Well, I'll share with you, Ed, that this is one of many policy areas that my team and I are researching now. As chair of the business committee, I'm not seeing a lot of programs that support the same small businesses, women, minority, LGBT communities, the disabled communities. And my team and I are researching that as we speak, but it doesn't seem to be at the top with all the others. You know, broadband is not at the top with the climate change, right, and the health care and criminal justice reform. And my goal is to uplift these non-traditional conversations, right? Because when you talk about economic development and small businesses succeeding, if you're in rural Colorado and you don't have broadband, you can't run a business.
Exactly.
Right? The infrastructure is going to drive the economic growth to these small areas also.
There's been a lot of discussion lately around responsibility of corporate America, and you come from obviously a small business voice, chaired obviously the business committee in the Senate. You've heard from some of your constituents about the importance of those types of programs, but how do you weigh really the impact on corporate America today as you start looking at head taxes, tax on the wealthy, really funding some social safety net type programs, very needed services, homelessness, education, go down the line, but really funded on the backs of business. How do you weigh that balance of encouraging the job creators, the people that are paying taxes, that are hiring more people, driving innovation, helping keep America at the forefront, creating that GDP in the states without taxing those and putting an undue burden on corporate America? Where's that balance for you? How do you see your role in representing some of the same companies that we get to represent in the Colorado Business Roundtable?
Right. You know, when we look at the medium to larger businesses, I think, first of all, we do have to look at where is the corporate responsibility to uplift our communities in need, right? You talked about homelessness, and we know that development here in Denver is just, you know, leaps and bounds and leaps and bounds. And what I often ask myself is, you know, while Colorado is growing, and we have many successful businesses that you refer to and helping with the economic development and housing and commercial. And, you know, our economic growth is like, where is some of that social responsibility? And, you know, what goes through my mind, Jeff, is that, number one, when we look at education, and I'm big on like leadership development and how are we exposing our children, preparing them for that life one day, right? They want to go to college. Well, how do we make college more affordable and reachable to our students in this state? You know, we have a lot of programs around skilled worker development. You know, I ran a bill on that, right? How do we invest in our future? From education standpoint, getting our young people ready for if they want an office job in a corporation. And I think that's a part of the giving back. I think when it comes to the homelessness piece, we got a lot of development. Well, what would it look like if you put up a 40-story building, and I call it the college dormitory for homeless people? to live next door or live somewhere
right.
as a part of the development. To me, that is what we do. And I think in Colorado, we are very good at addressing those issues. We talk a lot about, big business, and big business is here, right? I think there's a crossing line. The crossing line is are corporations taking care of their employees, and how do they help with social responsibility? We talk about paid family leave. Are they getting time off if they have a loss?
I think Ed's chomping for that one coming soon.
I'm sure he is. And $15 an hour wage. Are they paying good wages to their employees? Are they having good working conditions? Right. I mean, right now we're looking at Kaiser and SEIU, and it's all about working conditions. And I was with the Boulder Area Federal Labor Organization this weekend for a parade, and I was like, well, what are the issues? What is most important to you? And every one of them said it was about working conditions. They're moving towards higher wages so people can live on them, and I support lifting and increasing the federal minimum wage. Why can't we do that across the country to make sure everyone succeeds and not living paycheck to paycheck? But it's about working conditions. So the balance, good working conditions, and help with social responsibility so that everyone can succeed.
As long as we're talking about the minimum wage, what do you support raising it to, and why?
Well, I've always supported lifting the minimum wage to $15 an hour in our state, and I am proud to say that there are corporations who are already doing that, right? There are corporations already taking up that flag and doing it. And on a federal level, I would support the federal minimum wage going up to $15 an hour. I think we have to be careful that we put a trigger in for inflation, because we've done a lot of work in this state, right, to gradually lift us up to $12 an hour. We're not there. I think it's like $11.90 now. But, the cost of living is rising faster than our wages, Ed. So I think the starting point, that if we can get everybody comfortable with it, is increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour.
If I could interject, sorry, I just have so that being said, with the small businesses, wouldn't you imagine that some of those would have a hard time paying that $15 an hour? Would you put in any sort of tenets there for if they can't afford that as a small business?
I think you'd have to provide support systems.
Okay.
For small businesses who can't afford $15 an hour.
Okay.
We can create those programs.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. That was a good question. Thank you.
In along those lines, and I'll just say, because you wonder about this, the minimum wage is now $11.10 an hour, hits $12 an hour on January 1st in Colorado.
Okay.
But let's talk about paid family leave. And before we get into the specifics of what you would do on a federal level, I want to kind of frame it like this. I know that you have put yourself forward, you mentioned already in the show, as someone who's brought together business and labor concerns over the years. And I've seen you do it repeatedly on telecom bills, on workers' comp bills, finding that middle ground. I know there was some frustration last year in particular from the business community with your work on paid family leave and with some of your work on climate change, that some businesses felt like, who is Angela Williams when it comes to business? So let me, before we discuss specifics, ask you that. Who is Angela Williams when it comes to business needs? Are you still the person looking to bring people together, or with some of these new efforts, have you decided, look, businesses got to give more ground than they're willing to give?
What I am still Angela Williams that you've known me for the last 10 years and has not changed. But what Angela Williams has grown to is there are the people, there are workers out there that need our help. And my goal last year was to employ and have a conversation with business about the Paid Family Medical Leave Act. I mean, there's 88% of employees in this state that do not have any type of paid family leave. 88%. What are we doing here? And we have a business community that can support programs in which we're taking care of our employees. I mean, Jeff, that goes to what we were just talking about. What is our expectation of larger businesses? And yes, there was a lot of pushback on that, but it was me. I felt like I was the person. That's why I got on that piece of legislation to work with the business community and to kind of challenge them to say, look, we need to step up here. If you look at the federal FMLA program, it was written in 1993. There's no nuclear traditional family there. There's no nuclear 8 to 5, give me my paid time off and vacation and all is good. People in this state and this country are working non-traditional jobs, and some of them 2 and 3 jobs where you can't build up paid time, right, in case you have the loss of a loved one. And so it was probably one of the biggest challenges I've seen in my 9 years, Ed, to be honest with you. However, I don't give up. It is complex. We did pass the legislation and actually have met in our meeting all the requirements to make sure it's a solvent program. And that's my business side. Yes, it needs to be a solvent program. We need to make sure we can deliver on what the intent, because we don't want unintended consequences.
And I'll just ask, then I'll give you the mic back, Jeff. And you're right. I mean, the bill passed to set up a committee that's looking at coming back with a proposal in 2020. Turning away from the state and toward the federal, though, what would you seek as a U.S. senator in terms of federal paid family leave? And interestingly, how would that work in conjunction with state programs? Since I'm sure you don't want to just get to Washington and undo everything you've done in Denver.
Oh, I would agree with that. But one thing I do agree is that we need a federal program for family paid leave. We do. Like I said, the current federal law right now was written in 1993. It is outdated, and that's why you see states taking the reign to pass family medical leave. And I would absolutely take my experience and the model and my learnings of what we've seen here in Colorado to Washington. I don't know that it would be, I'm sure it would not be probably as fine-tuned as it is on the state level, because you're talking about a federal program, right? And I could see that we would have to implement, the time off. What is the length of it? What do you get it for? Who do you include?
Could people use both state and federal?
Well, that would have to be coordinated because, first of all, if you pass a state law with the federal laws trump the state law, well, then that undoes all the work that you've done. So it would be very complicated, but I absolutely support the fact that we need to look at a federal medical leave program for employees.
It's fascinating. I know some of that discussion, obviously, from our board at the Colorado Business Roundtable and the greater business community really looked at those types of businesses that do offer the 12% you're referring to. What are the exclusions? What are the provisions for those companies that already offer? How do you carve that out? How do you find the right balance between, the small business that has 2 or 3 employees and lose a third of their workforce when somebody goes out and still has to continue to pay into, but yet hire somebody else to stay in business? And I know there was a lot of dynamics around that. We've got about 1 minute and 20 seconds. Talk a little bit about what you're trying to carve around the compromise and how you, not necessarily the details because you're going to run for U.S. Senate, but how you look at bringing those diverse voices together when they're so widespread, so divisive, when people are looking to this is going to ruin business and the state businesses are going to close. How do you approach that? How do you view yourself as a senator helping bring people together and drive that compromise?
Well, I believe that it's what I've always done is bringing all interested parties to the table and having a conversation about the challenges that businesses might have by implementing a program like this, and that's going to be small business. It can be medium business. It could be a one-person shop. I think that's the key, is getting everybody to the table from both sides of the aisle to talk about it. And then having representation also from employees who work in those types of businesses, right? And it's a complex conversation, Jeff, but I'm not afraid of complex conversations and getting people to the table. In the Colorado legislature, for the first time ever in history, I've been able to get business and labor at the table to have a conversation about some of the issues that we deal with, and that's a part of my passion, getting people, not parties, to the table to solve those complex issues.
Well, talking about those complex conversations, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have another 20 minutes here with Senator Angela Williams. We are talking about the great Senate race. I have Ed Sealiver with Denver Business Journal and Jeff Wasden with the Colorado Business Roundtable. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. Once again, I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and we are talking the great Senate race here with Ed Sealiver of Denver Business Journal, Jeff Wasden of Colorado Business Roundtable, and Senator Angela Williams, who's running for U.S. Senate. We got a seat that's open. We have many seats that are open. It's a great race. We're going to jump right back in.
Senator Williams, quick question for you, or just more of a comment, certainly around some of the conversation we did around corporate responsibility. The Business Roundtable nationally put out a statement about a week and a half ago. It's garnered significant press and attention that really talks about this change from shareholders to stakeholders. And so I think we're hearing it. We understand our role and responsibility. We're excited about what that looks like and moving forward about how we can be greater players and engage in those conversations. So if you haven't seen that, it's well worth a read there and looking at what corporate America is doing. I want to jump into an issue really impacting corporate America, one of our biggest issues, which is educational workforce, right? Where do we get the talent to continue to innovate and drive us forward? Earlier had an opportunity to attend the executive order signing by Governor Jared Polis for the new office, the Future of Work, that'll be under Joe Burrell at the Department of Labor. I had workforce development there. I had Angie with the Department of Higher Ed there, and a great signing for this office, really talking about how Colorado should be a leader in driving the innovation, the needs to talk about the transition from technology and certainly renewable energy space as you're looking at the Office of Just Transition. Where are you at in areas of education, workforce? What is government's responsibility to be a player in there? What have you done in your career that'll help prepare you for some of those conversations?
Well, I think, first of all, the path to a educated workforce, and also whether it be skill levels or if it's in a corporate position, the key is to education. And we have to make education affordable so that all of our students in Colorado feel like they can achieve that goal. You know, we grow up, we go to high school, get your high school diploma. Now you got to go to college and get that degree. But I think we have to make it affordable, and there's so many students, and I heard this last night, people and adults are still concerned about, student debt. When I graduated from college, I had student debt over my head, and kids are still having student debt over their head. And so I think there are things we can do in Washington to make education more affordable. And even a 2-year college degree, I would support the federal government funding that, for kids who want to do that. Now, you're talking about workforce development. In my career, I passed the Work Act for 2 years now and have appropriated $10 million so that we have a skilled workforce training programs for students and or adults or whomever who want to learn about skilled trades in the workforce development. Not everybody wants to sit behind a classroom and a desk for 4 years, right? And I think that the Department of Higher Education has been working on this for a long time, and education just it's not cookie cutter, and it looks different for everyone. So it might be that 2-year degree, it might be that certificate, it might be the 4-year degree, it might be a master's. However, we need to provide the opportunities and the training for that. And in my experience, what we've always had to do, and we need to continue to do, because I talked to, in my career, CEOs of corporations to say, well, we're telling our kids to go to school, get a degree, and you're not employing them. So why is that? And many have said to me that they don't get those soft skills. And that's training that I've done in years about the soft skills. So I think that's a piece. It's the skill, but if the CEO says we're having a golf tournament and you're not playing, you're missing an opportunity. And you may not even know how to play golf, but the fact that you get out there and you expose yourself and you're with your colleagues, those are soft skills, right? What do I wear to the CEO's Christmas party? I mean, those are soft skills. And we also have to teach them how to have courageous conversations, so that they acclimate faster. And so I just think that those are some of the things we can do to better prepare, and I think our businesses do and have bought into, things that we need to do in order to help acclimate and have a strong workforce. But I believe the education is going to be that core for whatever that looks like for a person.
Yeah, those fundamental employability skills,
Right.
team, problem solving, critical thinking that are so critical. And I think you're seeing some great things. And it's a credit to the governor of the state of Colorado, right, to do that by executive order. Start thinking about that, because really, the jobs are changing. We need to be prepared for that and make sure that business, is supplied with the right kind of talent that continues to keep us at the forefront of this innovative curve.
And I just have to ask real quickly, you mentioned the idea of supporting federal funding for 2-year degrees. Where are we going to get that money from?
Taxpayers like you, Ed.
Raising taxes?
Are you still-
Or,
I didn't say raise taxes.
Okay. No,
We
but I mean, seriously,
reappropriate.
that's not a small price tag
I
there.
agree.
Where are there areas to cut from, reappropriate from? How do you find that kind of money?
Well, I believe that, you work closely with the Department of Education. There has been some programs that have always been created, No Child Left Behind. You can create the programs. It'll have to be the political will to fund that within our federal budget. I don't think we need to increase the federal budget and the debt right now, but absolutely, we can be creative and we can find the money
Okay.
if we're going to prioritize our children's education.
Okay. Well, let me switch you, just because I know that you have done a lot of work on climate change here in the past year in particular. Let's talk big picture, what that could mean on the federal level. Let me start with this question, then we'll get more broad. A lot of people are talking about Alexandria Ortiz AOC's. Thank you. AOC's Green New Deal. Yes or no?
No.
Okay, so talk about what you want in terms of climate change in rather than the Green New Deal, and what it could mean to business.
Well, first of all, you asked me a yes-no question, and it doesn't mean that I'm against the Green New Deal. I think there's some good ideas in it, but I also believe that whatever goals we set have to be achievable. So I look forward to those conversations if I'm the Democratic nominee and you all send me to Washington about goals that are achievable. We've talked about jobs too, and what does that just transition look like as we move towards saving our country and the future for our kids when it comes to climate change. As you know, I passed the Climate Change Act here in Colorado. It's one of the, I think that could also be a model. It's one of the more aggressive plans we've ever passed in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But if we're going to set goals, I want to make sure we can achieve them, Ed.
What would that look like? What kind of things must we do to set goals? Particularly, how does that affect the energy and fossil fuel industries on a federal level?
Well, that's a big conversation right now. It's how we know we need to transition out of fossil fuels. And again, as we look at transitioning out of fossil fuels, we got to think about, okay, what does job transition look like also? From that standpoint, I think it's going to be critically important that as we look at fossil fuels, there's conversations about a carbon tax, right? what would that look like? How would that be received with the carbon tax, just to reduce emissions in our country? And I look forward to having those conversations with my colleagues in Washington, D.C.
It's interesting, and I was ready to jump into transportation infrastructure, which I know we've been trying to address here in the state. It's certainly an issue federally as well, and so we're going to come back to that. But you brought up AOC. We're certainly in the throes of a Democratic primary debate going on right now for president. There's a lot of discussion, Angela, around this socialism, progressive movement, and Ed brought up AOC and the Green New Deal. Who and where is Angela Williams on that political spectrum? You've referenced the divide and the polarization that's going on in D.C. Where do you plant yourself? Who do you align with? When you get back to D.C., if you're elected, where do you fit in the United States Senate when you've got some very polarizing figures like Bernie and Elizabeth Warren and others? And what is your style? What do you hope to accomplish? How would you describe yourself to somebody that asks whether you're a progressive or more moderate?
I would say that I am an elected official who is passing policy on behalf of the people. We have all these labels about progressive. I've done progressive policies. I have that record, right? I've done some things in moderation only to make sure that we can move some policies forward. Sometimes you have to compromise to move the ball forward. But I can represent progressive, and I can represent small businesses, and that's what I bring to the table. That's the beauty of my skill set. I want to pass the policies that, I'm a pragmatic person also, but I want to pass the policies on behalf of the people of our state and our country. We've had this interesting, you bring up the label that the GOP has says, well, Democrats are socialists, and I don't want to go away without talking about that because, I think number one, that's a label to just distract us. And we get in the weeds and you start defining whether you're a socialist or not, Why do we have to do that? What this country is built on is, one, it was social programs that Roosevelt and that generation created to help people in need, right? You got Social Security, you got Medicare, you got Medicaid, you have programs to feed kids. That's who we are. In the sense of helping people. So this democratic socialist conversation is not one I care to engage in because we've done that. But America and our state is all about innovation and business too, right? We're talking about how do we educate kids? How do we encourage them to go into STEM programs? We can do that. And that's what this country is built on. So I don't prescribe to the label because I think it creates a label by the Republican Party on us when we are a country that helps people in need. And we've done that. We have a history of it.
So speaking of policies then, let's jump right back into the transportation infrastructure discussion. Nationally, the U.S. Chamber has certainly put out a proposal to raise the federal gas tax by 25 cents a gallon. There's been some other discussions by several of the groups, the motor carriers, certainly the Business Roundtable and others, about what do we do for our crumbling infrastructure, our airports, our grids, our highway transportation systems. What are your thoughts? What are your ideas? What should happen in D.C. to address this issue?
I think, again, it comes down to where is the political will to address our infrastructure. Yes, our roads, our bridges, our airports are crumbling under us across the country. And, we've dealt with this issue right here in Colorado, and I just don't know why we've come so close to prioritizing this issue, but then things fell apart because of different sides of ideologies across the aisle. And I would suspect those are the same challenges that we're having in Washington, D.C. But, if you look at the gas tax, I know in Colorado we haven't raised gas tax since 1992, but no one seems to have that political will to take that on. And I thought about it a couple of years ago, and I thought, oh, it'll take me my whole lifetime to get this one through. But I think it's the political will to prioritize funding for our crumbling roads and bridges. I mean, we can't continue to do Band-Aids and have Band-Aids, because there are natural disasters that come through and they destroy our infrastructure. And so let's go fix that because we had to, or let's go fix this bridge because we have to. And I think it's going to take political will and the prioritization of funding to address transportation and infrastructure. And, infrastructure is just not our roads and bridges. What about our water systems across this country? And what we're doing to preserve our water and the infrastructure for that. So I'm looking forward to that conversation also, Jeff.
So as long as you kick that door open, I'll just come back to you. I mean, it's been since 1993 that the feds have raised the gas tax. I mean, what are your thoughts on possibly raising the gas tax? And I want to incorporate that into a bigger question of, is the gas tax the way to go to fund our road system in particular, particularly as we go to more electric vehicles and more fuel-efficient vehicles? Or do we need to think about other ways in addition? But I do want to ask you, gas tax, yes or no? Increase.
Yes.
Yes. Do we need to think about bigger pictures too?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, technology and, I'm a big fan of electric vehicles. I passed a piece of legislation on electric vehicles. So, is there, it hasn't taken off totally here in Colorado, but as we look at it expanding across the country, yes. We need to look at that, and we need to look at how technology will change, and who's driving on the roads, what are they doing? We do have to take into consideration the truckers, right? The truckers have been around for so long, but I think we need to not only depend on just only one source of funding. We're going to have to get smart and creative and innovative about that also.
Real quick on healthcare, give me your bullet point speech on healthcare and what needs to be done.
My bullet point speech on healthcare is that, number one, we need to make sure, of course, that everyone in our country is covered and have some type of healthcare insurance. I think that universal healthcare is where I'm at now. There's two paths here. One, you got the whole conversation about the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act, I believe we can expand upon. We know it's not perfect, but it's covering a lot of people in our country. So I believe we can expand upon that. And I think there's a conversation also about, is it Medicare for all? Well, this is where I am. Medicare for all, or expand on the Affordable Care Act, but you do not take away people's public options. So how do we put a public option in either one of those? I don't think this country can handle starting from scratch with healthcare.
Yes.
We just can't do that.
Angela, I know we're running out of time with you today. I want to get one more very important question of the business community as it relates to trade and the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement. Said Ed pinned you down on a yes-no question on Green New Deal. Do you support USMCA? And then you could expand on any views around trade and tariffs that you'd like to.
Well, I think currently what I see happening is that the way the trade and the tariffs are being imposed and how our states and our companies and our rural Colorado, how it's affecting our farmers too, that it's not being handled in a proper fashion. And I think that's just due to lack of being able to negotiate and understand what the needs are. So I am very, very concerned about how our trade tariffs are being handled. And we need more people like the Colorado Business Roundtable to go to Washington and help me get that designed.
We're on it.
We're on our way. Thank you so much, Senator Angela Williams. Where can we find more info about you?
You can find more information about me at www.angelawilliamsforusenate.com, and 4 is spelled out FOR.
Thank you very much.
Angela, thanks for joining us today.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.